What is a life? What is a dream?
What is a man? A miserable little pile of secrets!
So says Dracula before his showdown with Richter Belmont in the intro of Castlevania's Symphony of the Night. The immortal, the supernatural, scorns the miserable little pile of secrets who, with his controller, figures he's got a good enough shot at vanquishing evil, and does. All before the player ever enters the protagonist proper, Alucard, who will face a much longer fight against the darkness because he is not a true hero yet, but is now part of this larger, evil-vanquishing lineage. This is what a lot of people expect from video games and what the market generally caters to. A hero strengthening themselves to save the world. Or like, hero enough, anyway. A frame of reference that's entirely rejected by
Little Goody Two Shoes.
Okay, a game about a miserable little pile of secrets, sure, but also a commoner and a shrew who collects the basic goods needed to keep herself alive, long enough to realize her dream, escaping all of this shit and getting the bag. Poor, petty, and selfish. Bro, I'm sweating! Little Goody Two Shoes, a game about a young woman working her days away in a quaint country town. And also some other stuff happens. It's a title that's pulled heaps of praise for its visuals that make me believe in being alive, and an experience that sells its narrative through its mechanics in such a compelling way, it deserves special mention. So what do? Day to day, you meander through this rustic mountain community, completing chores for villagers to earn enough money to stay alive. You buy things from the store and pursue relationships with 3 other characters. It's a simple setup, the kind that lulls you into a false sense of security before shit gets decidedly unreal and you're made to trudge through the horrors. Otherwise, I'd say it's pretty relaxing, fairly cozy game, captures what it means to be alive. The thing's built on a solid foundation, but what really stands out are the aesthetics. You know, you look at a game like this thinking, how is this in my hands? How did this ever come out? And I'm glad the closet couldn't contain it. Little Goody Two Shoes isn't just beautiful, it's blindingly pretty, a genuine modern gem. And it's not just the meticulously detailed pixel art, it's everything. Lift up the floorboards and you're gazing at opulent, intricate menu assets that capture with an artist's brush the pastoral fantasy of the setting. The deep nostalgia for rurality, small dignities for threadbare lives whittled from nature's own gifts. But it goes further. From the small details to the actual musical numbers with mixed media presentation, this is a game that shouldn't exist. But it does. And it didn't come from nowhere. Let's jump back to 2016. There's the real horror story. Small-time indie dev studio Astral Shift releases RPG maker horror title Pocket Mirror for free, their very first game. It captivated a small audience, and for pretty clear reasons. It's a fringe project for a fringe kind of player, delving into a grand manifestation of mental illness in pursuit of self-acceptance. It's cute, it's quirky, it's horrifying.
Shut up, I'm wearing headphones!
So regardless of game design good or bad, me gamer do big thing, it was serving people a mysterious online experience totally free of charge, and one with multiple endings. It's an onion meant to be peeled back over multiple playthroughs. Or you could just chop it all up and cry about it. This early RPG Maker game isn't nearly as draped and adorned as its eventual successor, but it's important to acknowledge the roots, because things don't just sprout from the ether. Pocket Mirror is something like a horror tour through Shitneyland, if you will, moving from room to room to uncover the next awful thing to feel bad about. A sentient painting woman whose eye you tear out to save yourself. A bunch of dolls just hanging around. A lot of fun stuff in general. Right. You die with shocking speed. It only takes a single tap whenever you're being attacked to hit the game over screen, but that's a feature, not a bug. The devs list a number of inspirations like Alice, Madness Returns, but more importantly, other RPG Maker horror titles like Eve and The Witch's House, a quiet kind of gaming lineage that few people ever interface with, at least compared to the broader gamerdom. And death, usually comically visceral and surprising death, is common in those kinds of titles. Not because it makes the experience better, not because it qualifies as good game design, but because it puts a wall in front of the player. The run ain't long, the stakes are life or death, and you aren't armed or trained enough to defend yourself, right? I don't think this character's packing heat, if we're being honest. So it's a reality of the fiction, as annoying and unsatisfying as it can be to push through. Sometimes victory is hard-won, and mechanically deserving of a fiddly input check. Oh, I get it. My success is a total long shot in this scenario. Yeah, Okay guys, I pay my own taxes and I can cook over 30 dinner recipes. What else you got? Of course, if you're one of those, but is it fun people, you'd much rather have a shotgun and turn the game off in 5 minutes like a bad Mario Flash parody. But that would ignore the art, the narrative, the idiosyncrasy. And that's partly what we're here to highlight. Or would you prefer every game were Mass Effect 3? Now, I love Mass Effect 3 to play, but sometimes we have to let a game play its music, even if that means it's right in your ear. It's worth mentioning that the game was remastered and relabeled as Pocket Mirror Goldener Traum, or Golden Dream, hitting online retailers a number of months before Little Goody Two Shoes, which is an interesting choice. Pocket Mirror serves as an effective sequel to the events of Little Goody Two Shoes, but I won't be spoiling any specifics until later. You play as a nameless girl armed with only her pocket mirror, a lucky charm she was told would always protect her. In case you don't take the hint, you'll die within the first 10 minutes if you leave it behind, transitioning to another room. It's important to the girl, so you must always protect the mirror. I feel that. I never go anywhere without my phone. And leaving it somewhere? What if someone looks at my Notes app and sees all my Magic the Gathering deck lists? It's hard to run room-by-room commentary for this thing, so let's look at the aesthetics. Let's maybe not talk about the aesthetic. You're trapped in what appears to be an old mansion of some kind, but reality is constantly bending and breaking zone by zone. Talking pumpkins litter every area, dolls spring to life, paintings leak, sentient stuffed animals dance in a ballroom. The spots of color are exceedingly grandiose or feminine. Tea parties, hedge mazes riddled with roses, throne rooms, but these spaces are segmented with dark, dingy hallways, and the journey eventually gives way to perpetual gloom, darkness, and surreality.
I don't know if I like this game, man. This game...
Many areas are devoid of music, lending a genuine sense of loneliness and unease to the experience. Like they recommend on their itch page, play with headphones in the dark. But maybe you should avoid that because even when you have an in-game friend of some kind, they're always rushing off or trying to make you acquiesce to their demands. You're constantly talking to pumpkins who are whimsically caught up in their own world, people who talk right past you or think you're stupid. There is no room for this girl in this place. I feel that. No, I didn't catch the Knicks game. I stayed in my room all day, writing bullshit about video games. Above all else, Pocket Mirror is a mystery from its setting to its protagonist. You try asking who you are, how this or that person knows you, where you are specifically, and you're met with nothing but deflection and accusations, stilted dialogue. You are never able to freely and openly communicate with anybody, and that's what's so brutal about the experience. On top of putting the player through the occasional reset hell, you're also denied any kind of closure throughout the playthrough, and even at the end, unless you get one of the endings that lets more on about the game world. Then, if you really want answers, you're made to run the gauntlet again or look up everything online. It's a hard sell, quality payoffs or not. And it's specifically frustrating because looking back at my initial dissatisfaction with the writing, there wasn't much wiggle room to actually present it otherwise. If anyone at any point explicitly stated who they were, who you were, what was happening, the mystery would unthread instantaneously. Pocket Mirror relies on symbolism to imply its meaning in the spaces you traverse, and those symbols become much more clear on a second pass. For example, this big cheesecake means someone is very hungry. Really very hungry indeed. It's not an entirely straight shot from start to finish. You can walk into bad endings by making certain choices. You can put more or less energy into your run, dig around less, care less, and get an ending that suits your actions. The big one is collecting regalia, these golden treasures that have a direct impact on the ending. You can also scrounge for a few phonographs that give out slightly more detail about the protagonist and various clues about her backstory. That is, if you're willing to root around in what I imagine Jordan Peterson's house looks like. Goldener Traum got a pretty heavy facelift in time for Little Goody Two Shoes, and that's important. Astral Shift wants to craft visually opulent games. It wants to offer something players can devour, not simply consume. Like a big fat animal. No, little German boy, don't go in that YouTube video, no!
Oh my god! This YouTube video is full of content 7!
Sake.
It's important to yap on the aesthetics because everything about the game is intentional. Astral Shift is very clearly tapping into classic shoujo manga and anime aesthetics with the distorted facial features, the sharp chins, the eyes, and the sheer decadence of the clothing. It's enough to strain believability. Elise is meant to be poor, but since all the leading women dress with frills and bows and things, it's hard to get all gamer like, this is so unrealistic. Women can't dress pretty. If I've learned anything doing YouTube, it's that you can serve on a budget. The mixed media aspect and multiple accessed art styles from the various staff members at Astral Shift lend an almost scrapbook feel to the thing, which is more important than you might think. Instead of being incohesive, it makes the thing seem piecemeal, genuine, cobbled together from what the team could muster, which works perfectly for a game about a poor girl in a poor town in the middle of nowhere trying to find worth in her small-time life. Artistic decisions, I guess, are really easy to overlook because if they scan well, if they make sense, you have no reason to think about them. But so much in this game is well considered. The disparate pieces exist in harmony, the nostalgic classic anime segments, the noise filter, which YouTube's auto denoise filter has undoubtedly reduced to mud. How's that for preservation of artistic vision? They present some scenes in 4:3 aspect ratio. These people are more committed to their aesthetic than you'll ever be to anything in your entire life. A few pieces look like they're made of paper and crayon. The sprite work bespeaks an earlier time, at least to people around my age. While the visual language of old anime and video games was at one point very modern, they now convey nostalgic, historic, dated instead, which is exactly what the setting wants. Leaves, trees, and buildings are occasionally superimposed on the screen, lending depth to a world that looks like a painting. It's one of those effects that's easy to take for granted, but bestows a degree of immersion to exploration and a more defined character to the world. It's hard to harp on about the incredible lighting, the rays, the vistas that cast the surrounding landscape as utterly picturesque, but I do it because I believe in your capacity to understand the grandeur of the world and the game's inclination to show Elise how small and poor she is constantly. This level of visual consideration extends to every area of the game, including the chores or minigames, which showcase Elise's work abstracted for the video game medium, cast in these incredible wooden arcade frames, and again, presented with intricate pixel art and scan lines to boot. The visual language of classic gaming set alongside simplistic controls to simulate boring small-town chores. I could cry. Aside from all of that, I think the game's good too. One of the problems with mysteries, especially weird, abstract mysteries, is trying to ensure the payoff is felt. You can be an Umineko and captivate all kinds of people, but juggling with the abstract, imaginary balls, is harder than people give it credit for. And LGTS does have a mystery, just like its forebear. Two even, but critically keeps one optional. Sure, the main plot is there, tempting you into the woods and off the beaten path, but even then, you're still in control of your destiny to some degree. Everything you do is consensual. You embody this character in more ways than one. Oh my god, she just like me for real! What really sells Little Goody Two Shoes is its story told through its mechanics. Elise lost her mother at a young age and spends her days as a maid of all work, meaning a general laborer who does whatever she can to keep herself afloat, picking apples, babysitting, etc. Elise's greatest wish is to escape poverty, leave this town, and live in a castle surrounded by wealth and comfort. Oh my god, girl, same! The game introduces this character as kind of mean and selfish. She fantasizes about making the villagers work as her servants, and right after, her home is broken into and she chases down the thief only to find a strange vagrant girl who apparently wants a place to stay. And more, as is later revealed, to guide Elise towards, quote, her destiny, and then probably info dumped about 50 pages of Wikipedia astrology. Elise, thinking with her loneliness instead of her brain, makes the girl clean her home as payment for the break-in. She immediately feels guilty, but the girl sticks around and stays with Elise for the rest of the runtime. We're shown that Elise is impoverished, fairly miserable, but kind to others regardless. And that's probably instinct. When you can't spare much, you can always spare kindness. You have a hunger meter, and you have to keep it above empty to survive. We've seen this before. Minecraft, famously, living in the real world. other such places, so you head to work in the few available times you can actually work and get handed pennies, just enough to keep yourself going. You're actually paid per your performance, which is important. From a design perspective, you should reward players for putting in the effort. With that effort, it's possible to earn enough through hard-ass work to stay a little more ahead than usual. Is that resonating for anybody else, or is that just me? I think the sea people heard that. I think extraterrestrial beings from beyond the stars heard that. You can romance certain characters, but you can only romance them at certain times, and it almost always intersects with working hours, meaning you need to put yourself behind or get yourself ahead before you can enjoy leisure time. What it feels like getting a YouTube channel off the ground. Little Goody Two Shoes is a pretty powerful social isolation and poverty simulator. Elise rapidly grew on me because her struggle is something anyone and everyone except the very upper crust should understand. I don't know anyone my age who isn't worried about being able to retire. I barely know anyone with a quality savings account. It doesn't help that we're living through truly historical economic times right now, but things are hard, and mostly always have been. Working hard isn't some magic cure-all. You can't hard work your way out of true poverty, and you can't create more hours in the day, more energy to keep going. We need rest. We need that kind of spiritual healing you can only get from your interests or your loved ones, and so often we're made to sacrifice joy for survival. And it's so powerful because looking around, this world is beautiful. This world is so unbelievably beautiful. But when you're exhausted, it's so easy to go colorblind, so easy to tunnel your vision and yearn. You, the player, wear those ruby red shoes for the entire length of the game, and it works so well to tell its story because you're made to experience the exhaustion of fighting to live. But it's deeper than food and money. Strange things happen across Kieferberg day over day. Someone's horses are stolen, then found nearly dead, panicked and exhausted, just outside of town. A windstorm causes some damage, the fountain overflows, and all of these things are blamed on the witch, something malevolent, mysterious, and fictional. A scapegoat for the villagers' misery. The problem is, ignorant people will turn their misery on anyone they can, and that includes Elise, so the player is made to duck suspicion, wrangle an actual suspicion meter by responding in a sensible way to all kinds of scenarios and questions. Unfortunately, the local tattletale Muffy notices Elise living with this strange girl, Rosenmarine, and starts blackmailing you for food at risk of her spreading nasty rumors and raising your suspicion meter. This little is willing to get a sister burnt at the stake for some bread. We respect the grind, fair enough. If you fail to keep the bar under control, you'll be tied up in the woods and left to die. Bro, give me a break. You're gonna listen to Muffy? Her mouth looks like a f***ing goop. The townsfolk are mostly fine, just small-minded and traditional. Elise doesn't fit in with them, and again, that narrative reality is directly stated, but also expressed through many other avenues. The suspicion meter and occasionally antagonistic villagers are part of it, but consider that Elise's house is on the outskirts of town, and that she's made to trudge through the woods to reach it, that she's visually distinct from everybody except the other romanceable women. I love this type of visual conveyance because not only does it set the other villagers up as mostly unimportant, generally not deserving of full portraits or even bothering to talk to them, and when they do get them, they usually look odd. It draws a line between the young women and everyone else. Elise, Freya, Rosenmarine, Leb, all suspected at one point of witchcraft, all bright, full of promise, not fully settled in life, and all possible romance options. They're unique. They mostly don't fit in. Little Goody Two Shoes is an openly queer game, though it doesn't make a big fuss about it, just treats it as a functional reality of the setting, gives characters believable and genuine romance, and that queerness underpins the main narrative thread, wanting to escape an oppressive reality, with a compelling meta-narrative, the struggle to exist authentically in a world that not only suspects you of being evil simply for being alive, but also actively distrusts and makes pariahs of those not explicitly in lockstep with tradition. It's also not addressed by the NPCs, but they would if the characters were open. Just a little feeling. Being gay is a sin. Okay, the only sin here is that haircut, bro. Yikes. It feels so weird to call Little Goody Two Shoes a survival game or strategic, but I guess it is. Serving this much isn't just natural, sweetie. It's mathematics. You make a lot of small decisions throughout the day before delving into the nighttime segments, which are much more action-oriented.
Okay, timestamp this for posterity. This is really scary. What the fuck?
Or as close as this kind of framework allows for. Most of your money goes to bread and, depending on your goals, insanity-reducing items like grape juice. Now let me explain that. You need bread to survive. We've been over that much, but you can find a lot of free food at different points in the game. On the rare occasion, a villager might give you some, and Lebkuchen, your oldest friend in the village and daughter of the baker, will hand you food for free every night. Nice touch. Cement that relationship mechanically. We appreciate that. Hey Lebkuchen, let's get this bread, am I right? You might think you need to play along with Muffy's blackmail shtick, but this is the K-Bash show, and we do not negotiate with terrorists. If you're feeling a little spicy, you can tell Muffy to eat shit and never hand her a crumb. This'll raise your suspicion meter, but as long as you're answering villager questions in a mostly competent way, without looking like a maniac or an asshole, you can keep all the cookies to yourself while Muffy cries like a miserable little ragamuffin. With the terrorist threat neutralized, the last real issue you'll have throughout your workdays is Rosenmarie. She offers to help you with chores every single day, and what does she do?
After today's seminar on astrology, we will make herbal teas and learn how to do tarot card
This is it.
readings.
I'm gonna die here in this village because of this purple-haired bitch. Yeah, she goes around telling the villagers about astrology and witches and other pagan shit while wearing the hat, so everyone starts asking if she's the witch. Shoot, she's most of the reason anyone suspects you at all. You shouldn't strike the neurodivergent, but Rosenmarie, I am gonna find the nearest mud puddle and ruin your hat. Even worse, she offers to assist you during minigames, which cool, right? You might suck at those off the hop, and she'll save your attempts. Setting aside that you can retry as much as you like, not that you really should worry that much about money in-game, Rosenmarie sucks up 2 bars worth of food on her own! On top of the one you consume for working at all. I think this is supposed to indicate that taking her along means you had to feed yourself, her, and her pet goat Flock, but I like to think it's because she's an unkept, slovenly glutton. Hey, Purple, put down the fork! And her name is clearly Rosenmarie, and the voice actor says
Rosenmarine!
but every time Elise says it, it's spelled Rosemarine. Maybe it's a carelessness thing. Maybe it's an approximation of a regional dialect. This is a Portuguese dev studio making a Japanese aesthetic video game in the style of a romantic depiction of an Austrian village translated to English. Surely a few things fall between the cracks, but I want to know, and nobody knows. Tell me! Tell me! Oh, it was like a gag. Well, I didn't laugh. Played with mild competence. You don't really need to sweat suspicion, food, or even romance. You only need to woo one girl to unlock more endings, and you've got enough time for that easy. I'm not sure it's even possible to win all their hearts in one go. Why bother? Sure, in Persona 5, the girls all kick the shit out of a cheating main character, but here, they'd probably have to burn you. Twice. Like turbo burn. I've gone so long without actually opening up about the darker side of the game, so mounting spoiler warning. First, we're going to talk about the witching hour, then about the story and its endings, and Pocket Mirror's endings as well. Consider this your escape hatch if your interest is piqued. Every night after the first day, Elise is whisked away to a dream world of some kind, or like, stumbles into the woods and has a really bad trip. The witching hour is the second half of the game, a series of challenges that change with each specific zone. You're first made to find a handful of keys to escape a spooky palace while dodging floating candles that can physically harm Elise. Take too much damage and... Jesus Christ. Nothing in the game harms Elise except for the supernatural, which should be a pretty obvious mechanical clue that you shouldn't trust anything magical. Rosenmarie makes a series of comments about the nature of your destiny, that she was effectively groomed to guide you towards your destiny, and explains that some guy, simply referred to as he, is trying to make contact with Elise. And throughout your witching hour excursions, you'll learn that this he wants to see Elise and needs her to bring tribute to actually greenlight the meeting. 3 offerings to be specific. The tender flesh, the sweetest nectar, you mean my...
Yes, it's exactly what you think it is.
And the good company. These are fairly cryptic names, but you'll find out you just need some of your mortal beings, so your blood mixed into wine, your hair baked into bread, and... Well, anyway, these gifts need to be brought in a basket. Yo, bro, what the fuck? And crafting the offerings puts the player into a...
Shadow game!
Evil and twisted arcade cabinet games. What if Sonic was evil? What if Squidward was evil?
These are great. The familiar, made slightly more challenging and just slightly different so it's possible to screw up, feels high pressure, but you're mostly equipped to handle it. Choice developer efficiency. And there we go. The tender flesh and the sweetest nectar. Now I've just got to romance one of these people. It's hard to meaningfully commentate the romance options. While there's no canon pairing here, Rose and Marine is treated as a separate entity in a sense, where Lebkuchen and Freya are frequently seen or hallucinated together, presumably because they're from the village, and the game hands you Rose and Marine and pairs you up with her throughout. She's definitely more advocated for by the game itself. I think she's a bit of a nuisance, so I went for Leb, whose name translates to cookies in English. Having seen all the romances over multiple playthroughs, I can say that they're cute, mostly playful, silly, heartfelt, etc. Elise is a bit of a loser, a girl failure if you will, and her overtuned, overcompensatory nature is welcome because the other girls are either moon-eyed, saccharine, or composed. However, since he asked for the good company, I guess we'll be taking Leb, Elise's oldest friend. This mystery is the guiding dramatic force of the game, carrying you through the week to reach the eventual payoff. Who is he? Will he really fulfill Elise's plea to escape all this poverty? Will we be sufficiently surprised by the reveal? These zones are terrifying, painted with eerie, menacing palettes, physically impossible spaces, and even presented as mixed media, incorporating clay and other materials to draw a clear distinction between the visually congruent daytime and the dreamlike witching hour. I think they're going for a maximalist vibe, which is great because, and no offense to the style, maximalism makes me anxious. And I think that's the intention. Most of these segments are dexterity challenges or puzzles, warping your mind with the most insidious, unbearable conundrums. Only the devil would have a heart so black. The kinetic vibe of the various zones, ducking floating candles, evading giant enemies, weaving between threats, and pathing through danger, all make the witching hour more exciting to physically experience and lend a sense of urgency and stakes to the play that isn't conveyed during the day. Work is tough and minigames can be annoying, but you can try again. You can get better with practice, and eventually you learn to spin those plates. They're just not terribly fun to spin for very long, and that's the point. You might think a young woman would make traversing dangerous, mind-assailing dreamscapes the last thing on her to-do list, but if even a single chance at a life beyond the smallness, the soft bigotry of the town exists at all, if there's even one way to avoid her ever having to cut wood again, I can understand her taking it. After all, the Elise we meet at the start of the game is vain, petty, and desperate. She's sick to death of this life, and it's not hard to see why when you're made to live it too. If I get one baby complaint, or like baby acknowledgement, it's that the witching hour segments aren't hard, but can be hard to understand, and in a game that's not, guiding you directly to the end goal in a straight line with incredible shooting mechanics, it can be a harder sell for people used to AAA gaming. I put down the game at least 4 times to either take a breather or look up a solution. It resists binge play in a few ways, sometimes because the mechanics feel primitive. The speed and proximity with which you need to pick up and deposit clusters of moths in this early segment isn't clearly communicated, and if you aren't regularly saving, you're gonna have a bit of a walk back.
When did I save last?
There's these birds which slam down out of the trees if you don't realize you're supposed to wait, observe which trees aren't shaking, and carefully walk through the danger. Those experiences add up. Small complaints about the game litter the internet, and it's not that LGTS is bad, but that it's mechanically invested in both its roots, the RPG Maker horror game, where this is fairly common, and narratively implying that trying to change your fate is a bit of a task. Kratos may be able to mash square, square, triangle to victory on normal mode and kill actual gods, but that's the purview of the AAA title, not the artisanal experience. For all its mild annoyances, the witching hour is equally as captivating as the daytime. Fields of green and sun-dappled trees invite rest and reflection, but they're just as in time. In the game's more dreamlike sequences, there's a genuine allure to the horror, beckoning the player forward. One more challenge, one more clue, more incredible, mind-warping sights beyond anything you'd ever see in the real world. The woods through which you make the same trek to and from town every single day. There's a certain strain of feedback this game receives, like, "If I were Elise, I would simply not engage with the supernatural and enjoy my life." But those commenters are either unempathetic or not paying attention. Being stuck, stagnating, is anathema to most people. And even if you've got a home, Making the same trips, performing the same chores, eating the same bread every day is enough to make some people go insane, to make some people desperate. It's not hard to imagine Elise going incredible lengths for a shot at happiness. When you're born there, just in the shadow of the sun, so close, but you lost the parental lottery. Yearning becomes second nature. There aren't many boss battle type challenges, the game has no actual combat framework, but you're made to do a couple of interesting encounters like this chase scene. See? It's just Sonic Adventure 2, this game is peak fiction, guys, yo! Arguably, the evil chores qualify as boss encounters as well, but the one I want to highlight happens near the end of the game. You face down this enormous demon and have to actually learn to avoid its different attacks, and after a certain point it'll ask you a question. Failure damages you, and I had to restart the fight 3 times because I got the question wrong every time. This is another little annoyance I have with the game, presumably because of the translation, or maybe just the sheer subtlety of the questions. I found it incredibly easy to guess wrong in all kinds of A or B situations throughout the game, but this one was the worst by far. The best principle, anytime someone asks you a question, is blame yourself first, try to be a good person, and don't come off as aggressive. But the actual linguistic difference between some of these is razor thin, and it's frustrating. In some cases, the questions don't even matter, but they all appear to, and the game teaches you that they do, so it's easy to agonize over a few of these as well. As always, save often. Speaking of, before we get to the endings proper, there is one major side quest you can finish over the course of the game. So, the mysterious notes and the truth behind St. Walpurga. Kieferberg is a rural community with a big, prominent cathedral and what looks like the figure of St. Mary adorning its outer wall. You can tell everything you need to know about this mountain backwater from these visual cues alone. Religion is important, maybe the only thing actually holding this community together, but inspecting the cathedral's statue reveals that it's actually dedicated to a St. Walpurga. So St. Walpurga is a real canonized saint, known for fending off pests and witches, and while the game's kind of a syncretic tapestry of multiple kinds of European influences, historical, artistic, etc., I don't know if I need to sit here and litigate the semiotics of everything. You know, we've got Miss Muffet, who sat on her tuffet, eating her curds and whey. On the first day after Mass, you find a note scrawled with the symbol of the maypole, and try to hunt down clues going forward about the strange incidents that afflict Kieferberg in the coming days. From the very first day, you can enter a cave at the crossroads outside of town, find priestly garments, and even more strange notes implicating your deceased adoptive grandmother, and even you as subjects of suspicion. What any of this means is entirely impossible to know until very late in the game. Afterwards, you're gated from digging into the mystery until more time has passed. You'll be directed to an abandoned structure blockaded by a wheel that eventually is pushed away, by no one in particular. You find a fish key that accesses the fountain, but only once it runs dry partway through the week. You can't actually complete the side quest proper until the very end of the game, when you make your final move for an ending. All of these hidden spaces drain your sanity, a bar that you usually don't have to worry about, even during the witching hour, which I imagine was part of the original version, given the nature of the witching hour, but likely got scrapped from the sheer time you spend in those spaces and the already strapped economy. No sanity results in a game over. Turns out Elise's smoke was not, in fact, too tough. You might be wondering, yeah, but why does she lose sanity here? It's just dark caves. Well, it's probably the— Ew! Ew! Get it away from the animal! They're not super terrifying, but you know, between the grabby hands and the womb puzzles, I think I get the picture. You have to pay or pick up items elsewhere to restore sanity as well, so pursuing this side quest demands a little more from the player than a standard run. Little Goody Two Shoes has 10 endings, but don't be alarmed. Most of these are variations related to who you romance, and what you decide to do in the end. So, the culmination of the quest for escape. Most players will probably romance one girl, successfully collect all of the offerings, and fail to be tied up in the woods. If they offer everything as directed, they'll meet him, Ozzy. That is a Tumblr Onceler Sona. Holy f***ing shit! Yes, the kid you meet throughout Pocket Mirror's runtime is him, the otherworldly demon who feeds on misery and collects the souls of young dreamers. He's called to you throughout the game, offering you a taste of wealth with the ruby slippers, beckoning in your dreams. As a demon, he has some principles. Bargains are kinda their thing. So he'll grant Elise riches beyond compare, the castle of her dreams, if she's willing to offer the gifts, including her own beloved and her firstborn child. It's a painful bargain coming this far, only to lose the chance at true love for something as vapid and fleeting as gold. Doesn't feel great, but the alternative is being destroyed, transformed into a golden girl in Ozzy's collection of servants for going back on the deal and losing everything. A bad end, but also an act of selflessness, realizing she's gone too far, too late. Sacrificing your love to Ozzy turns up some interesting endings, after the trauma, of course. Rose and Marine, Freya, their endings are darker, more about Elise realizing the weight of her mistakes, that she utterly obliterated other human lives, no less deserving of happiness than herself, to accomplish her selfish goals, no matter how justified she felt. But Leb's is worth highlighting. After experiencing absolute loss, Elise cloisters herself away and lives a life of prayer. And before being cast into hell for her crimes, is saved by the now forgiving ghost of Leb Kuhan, who ferries her to heaven. It's kind of an insane ending, but who cares? True love is shown to have transcendental properties, and Leb didn't ultimately lose her soul. It's not the canon ending, but it's my canon ending. I want Elise to win so bad because the struggle is felt. There's a trio of endings for failing to offer the correct items to Ozzy or failing to actually acquire the good company. Freya and Leb end up snapping out of the illusion necessary to lull them into Ozzy's grove, and she gets burnt at the stake. In Rose and Marine's ending, she casts aside any kind of personhood to fulfill the destiny she was apparently groomed for, and merges with Elise as a tree, locked in eternal stasis, returning from whence they, or at least Elise, came. If you paid attention throughout the Witching Hour segments and followed most of the side quest, you'll learn that Elise was birthed from the forest, birthed from a deer, and granted to Granny Holla as a gift from Ozzy himself, making this a kind of generational struggle against fate. It's also the cherry on top for the game's general critique of, let's say, slavish devotion to the grind. Not only are you unable to actually work hard enough to truly advance, you were an outcast from the beginning, not a part of that world at the very first breath. She wants to escape because she'll never be seen, at least in town, as anything other than a stranger. For people not keeping up, this is partly why Elise being queer is important to the story. The meta-text of not belonging in a place gels very well with someone feeling like they want to escape and going great lengths to escape that situation. We know this because the notes in the caves are written by a character in town who knows a whole lot about what happened with Granny Holla and Elise's sudden appearance. If you avoid the forest and pursue the truth, you'll learn that Father Hans himself is behind the emergence of the witch and all of the misfortune the town undergoes. He dabbles in powers beyond his understanding, trying to grasp at the nature of Saint Walpurga, and in doing so summons her to wreak havoc locally, but also privately to Elise. She appears at this juncture, someone who harasses you throughout the game in both in the woods and in town to finally possess you. It's another bad ending, but at least you learn the truth. I'm glad Ozzy is kept at a distance throughout the game, unlike in Pocket Mirror. I'm not trying to dog on the artist, it just would have been far less menacing if all of that, everything you experienced, was the result of this
Mamma mia!
guy, and you found out after a couple of nights. It could have been anything, a horrifying demon monstrosity. The game has the imagery, it's not a stretch, but instead it's the Onceler. Oh, Ozzy. At first, I wrestled with the endings. What is this trying to say? Never try to achieve anything ever? But the truth lies in the good endings if we're trying to make meaning out of the fear and cruelty of the experience. If Elise refuses to enter the forest and simply hangs out with her love interest, the game ends with our protagonist abandoning her lust for material gain, snapping out of her daze, and acknowledging the beauty of the things around her. The world was always beautiful. She has a home and a future. She has the ability to strive to succeed and work towards something with someone else. It only takes another lens, in this case a loved one, to understand the worth and value of all things around her. And the pair scratches out a life together in the hills and fields of the wider world. It acknowledges that happiness might not be an option in this town, but together the pair stands a chance elsewhere, away from the delusions of grandeur. It rejects the illusions, the madness of the witching hour, and accepts the world for what it is. It's not that the menus and the details are as beautiful as they are to remind players of what being wealthy is like, what a vain girl would like, but rather that beauty is found, made, perceived from the gifts of the earth or pieced together in harmony with others. A scrapbook joy known only to the maker. I appreciate how the game plays with the supernatural. It's obviously real in-universe and the common townsfolk believe in all of it really, gods, demons, witches, and yet it's completely fictitious, without invitation. It exists within the world, but only through some kind of connective tissue. The witch the townsfolk are so afraid of is very real, but doesn't exist on her own in a cottage somewhere. She was effectively summoned into the town. The mysterious he is trying to meet you but needs a series of offerings to make it happen, maybe to tangibly link the terrestrial and the supernatural. You even need to be invited via curse from 2 of his minions to access their lesser realms. Most of these involve entering the woods. The woods are the untamed wilderness, everything outside the town. They represent uncertainty and chaos, the opposite of surety and order, fear, evil. This isn't an inaccurate take. People have invented monsters from mere uncertainty, from not knowing, since people. The game accurately depicts paganism as nature-focused, and therefore aligns paganism with fear, associates witchery exclusively with women, gay women, and therefore links nature with womanhood, womanhood with evil, and evil with nature. It's unfortunate because while honest about the species, legitimately true to the human psyche and all of human history, it also seems to imply via its endings that evil is very genuinely found in nature and that other forms of belief outside of strict adherence to faith, and even dreaming beyond your means, leads to devastation and annihilation, which I at first mistakenly thought ran counter to the narrative. But it was an easy trap to fall into. The evil that happens to camp out in nature doesn't just sit there, bro. It goes out of its way to worm into your life, to unsuspectingly and dishonestly form pacts with otherwise innocent people. You can find a number of golden girls in the game, surprisingly more than 4, which is wild because I could have sworn it was just them. They forewarn you about how pursuing your little quest for wealth will go, but I'm just saying none of these broke got a Gucci bag, so legitimately what do they know? Collect them all and you can win a prize! There's a scene about halfway through the game where, with shocking nonchalance, you find the golden maiden version of your granny in a copy of your own home. The game obfuscates a lot of its info, so it's possible you think at this point that your granny is the witch. After all, the witch calls you her daughter throughout the game. But the truth is, your granny made a deal with Ozzy for you, and a small piece of Saint Walpurga, the pernicious nature spirit, was used in your creation. This is the connective tissue that ties Elise to the wood, to the occult. Like I said, the real message of Little Goody Two Shoes is contained in the good endings. It isn't simply critiquing Elise for being poor and wanting an escape, but instead for turning a blind eye to the riches all around her, the love she does have access to. It's why her escape from Kieferberg, having fulfilled Ozzy's contract, is so bitter. She has to marry a man she has no love for, who she has no attraction to. She has to kill her genuine self. And that rejection of her true identity is what creates Pocket Mirror. While there's no canon ending, Elise can't have a happy ending without invalidating Pocket Mirror, so it's understood that she goes through with the contract. Pocket Mirror has many endings of its own. Some you stumble across entirely on accident, but like I mentioned, they're mostly reflective of your own actions, investment, etc. My ending was bad. I failed to find the regalia, and Ozzy tortured and killed the various women I met in front of me before taking the protagonist's soul. Truly the bad end. But most people don't get this one. The endings revolve around understanding the premise of the game, and reveal only portions, so to spoil what we learn across multiple endings, you play the game as Goldia, Elise's daughter, who's traversing this impossible dream space because it's a manifestation of her internal strife. In reality, she's locked up in an asylum and suffering with dissociative identity disorder among other things, and cannot remember who she is, hence her confusion meeting all these women who are actually different facets of herself, her innocence, the more mature personality she was made to assume to cope with abuse from her father, among others. Failing to gather all of the regalia means that Goldia, unable to reconcile with herself, simply creates a new identity, the immaculate Platinum, who fears nothing because she has no baggage to hold her back. She utterly disassociates from her past self, which is tragic in a sense, but we can understand it as a means of survival. There are other endings as well, but all of these, Little Goody Two Shoes, Pocket Mirror's endings, tell a pretty simple story. Everybody is at least somewhat doomed by the narrative. How we choose to cope with that is what defines us as people.
今日から 来リーゼお嬢様って呼びなさい。
Little Goody Two Shoes isn't a purely homegrown piece. It's worth mentioning that while Pocket Mirror laid the foundations, you just don't get this level of aesthetic opulence without funding. And the game was published by Square Enix Collective, where games like Power Wash Simulator came from. This branch of Square was a valuable initiative for picking up specific projects with the intent to let developers develop, without slashing and curtailing and peering over the shoulder the way so many developers negatively describe the money people. Without the Square Collective, the game would very likely be more simplistic, more strapped. Maybe it wouldn't have released at all. I somehow doubt a game centered around queer romance, non-graphic and uncontroversial as it is, would get funding from a typical AAA studio. So much art that ever gets into the hands of people is what was allowed to exist per the people funding it. There's an old Stephen Sondheim interview where he mentions that musicals as they used to be no longer exist because in the past, you could shop your project around to investors and get a hit. The man himself did as much with Anthony Larson and Rent. And nowadays, projects are simply too expensive and need to be mega hits or they die, get pulled right off the docket. Artists have it hard, and it's always getting harder. Art's one of the few kinds of sustenance that has to justify its existence, and doubly so if it's not going to put money in some punchy pocket. Little Goody Two Shoes didn't come from nowhere. It came from publisher assistance, but more importantly, it came from years of development honing and considering where to take a vision from its initial imitative inception. Little Goody Two Shoes is what happens when you let artists create something wholly original. It's not a big thing, nowhere approaching mainstream, but I want to highlight what this game means. People are creating fan content for this microcosm of a developer vision. The company itself produced, in conjunction with members of its own staff and community, a full song for Freya, which is just fantastic on its own, regardless of context, and supplemental material for Pocket Mirror. Yeah, that game from 2016, all to help contextualize a character you meet basically only in words until an extra esoteric ending to Pocket Mirror Golden Earth Realm. Pure love. A small, passionate community that the devs managed to connect with, genuinely connect with their hard-made art. Art is messy, and nobody nails it on their first pass. But that unrefined creative thing that somebody might callously cast off as meaningless or cringe or trite or amateur birthed something resonant, impactful, beautiful, and still clearly expressing the creator's unrefined joy. Creatives should always strive for new heights, not trying to one-up themselves every time necessarily, but always aiming to more effectively convey their creative vision. Slam dunk that shit into the soul, and that's what LGTS is to me. You'll see people dog on creatives up and down Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, Discord, any public square because it's easier to shit on someone than uplift them or see possibility in what they can do. It's so easy to cast off than cheer on. Creatives have it rough. When you're small, it's thankless work, and even when it's free. And everyone wants to dissect and point out and criticize and categorize, and without regard to whether creation can even keep happening in those conditions. It's the same principle as kindness. It's free. Encouragement is free. We can make a better world, but we have to recognize what we have, what we're working with, to make that future a possibility. Hey, it's K-Bash. Huge thanks goes out to my $4 patrons. Check them out. Beautiful. And double special thanks goes to my extra generous patrons who are Adam Welsh, Air Pirate Sig, Acropolion, All the Singularities, Alpha 42, Andrew Redacted, Angel Rivera, Anthony, Arshwasser, Azriel, Azura, Aaron, Axinate, Bear Skeleton, Basement Dweller, Bosch 7, Ben M, Beguile, Big Papa Spray, Blake Against the Machine, Wargle Hargle, Blossom Dante, Bohop, Boom Dead, BH Operator, Born in Shadow, Brandon S, Brandon Hesse, British Gooch, Cow, Cakesar, Can I Cuss on Here? C-Dub, Catgirls Are Real, Caesar T, Hero Hero, Cordit, Chris Bromo, Cody Golden, Comfy Moogle, Cookie Bug, Couch Mobile, Crashgers, Crater, Chris BJ, Mono 19D, CW Glassworks, Denny Pangos, Danky Stag, Swag, David Castillo, Dara, Dash Granny, Decode, Deadword, Dead, Destrega, Dingus Bat, Doodle Flu, Doug Prince, DJ, Professor K, Dr. Cullen PhD, The Protagonist, Elias, Elpio, Elsa, Emperor Pickle, Empty Tenshi, Excalibur Shines, Nar, Fail Knight, Fuzillion, Forte Noir, Super Saiyan, Frog Vorbis, Garen
Return guaranteed.
Gato Nero.
Giggle Bites.
Glasses Kohard.
Glyph Seeker.
9cat.
Gobo Bobo.
Goose 6112.
Gray, the darkest black.
Garcory. Gucci Plant.
Hatsune Miku's Crack House.
Archive.
Demon. Game and Station.
Hermit J.
Pixie.
Honey Mutt.
Horn Tiger.
How do you know?
Huey.
I just took 7 grams of magic mushrooms and now I'm lost in the woods.
I'm supporting K-Bash just because I wanted to make this part of the video longer.
Inferno Galore.
Ingenious Clown.
IOBG.
I punched a sandwich.
It's not bad.
It's time to sue.
It's not good.
Ivy Ruth Langley.
Jack Hydra.
Jacob. James.
Jank Dankin.
Jason Lasky.
Jaden. James Vaughn.
Jay Drito.
JL Savarus.
Jay Deus. JK Hedgehog.
John Vo the Joker.
Jordan Joyner.
Jorzy Burden. Juicy Frost.
Julian My Julian.
June.
Kai Zeta Slow.
K-Bash's best K.
Keegan Too Cool.
Keith the Thief.
Kata Snack.
King Kuma.
Keej.
Knight Pike.
Clock.
K-Noe.
Kong 2020.
Kraden.
Crazy Dark Chocolate. Ice.
Kyle. Not that Kyle. KZ Excellent.
Lady Weeb. Laundry Mom. Lego Sid. Lethal Nibbles.
Linkle.
Little Big Trouble.
Loathsome Dung Eater.
Low Fat Mogul. Lucas Boy.
Blood Mac
James.
Lunati.
Magic Meows.
Mama Rollins.
Manapool.
Manic Pixie Space Pirate.
Mara Ganger.
Hercules. Marcus Rambles. Maximum Dong.
Meaty Smash.
Maple Puppet. Mega Boy E Nasty.
Metal Gear Gaseous.
Michelle Citrano.
Mike DeVere.
Mikusagi.
Moa.
Bobby Dobby, Big Titty Gok, GF Cooley.
Monochrome Only.
Monochrome Rainbow.
Morgana Black.
Modi.
Mr. Yeety Dabface McYoinkbomb.
Nyrenew.
Nito Torpedo.
Neon Dwarf.
Nifty Rex.
Not Nobel.
Nuggy.
Old Burgle.
Old Man Cranberry. Omni Nerd Zero.
Only
LK.
Gaplant.
Paperlandy.
PBK.
Pandemic Cowboy.
Pelagic Undulation.
PK Gaming.
E-Mike.
Popular Hitman. Prismatic Dan.
Pringle Prongle. Pringle Prongle. Probably not Grady.
Project Darklight.
Punch Fighter Champion.
Ponosaurus Rex. Quasar McDougal. Quillworth.
Raging Ataraxia.
Real Beans. Reggie Rodriguez.
Renteca Bond.
Ringed Relay.
Roy Londo.
RP Gamer.
Ryan Michelle.
Ryan Maury Brooks.
Saigon Man.
Salsa.
Salty Smasher.
Scribe Slendy.
Sakai no Award.
Sensual Coder.
Saphirium.
Sexy Bionicle GF.
Josh.
Nintendo.
Shut up, Wesley.
Silver Bear 909.
Sin.
God.
Sir Doodles Alive.
Sir Newton.
Sir Slurpsalot.
Skyward League.
Sleepy Wabbit.
Snart. Small Turtle House.
So Zeta Dad.
Sock'em
Boppers.
Suckdolager.
Space Lizard.
Spider Dad.
Squidged.
Squishword.
Star Night Sky.
Storm Strider and the House of Storm.
Streffen Battles. Super Dingus.
Super Sandwich Guy.
Taya Toxin.
George Chubbington. Terrence Swift.
The Big Bubby.
The Clown Prince of Cringe.
The Digital Dutchman.
The Good Lord has blessed me. Hallelujah.
The Green Loki.
The
Crispy Boy.
The Peacemaker Pyro. The Salt Knight.
The Nomad.
The Real McCoy.
The Toasted One.
Big Dick Mystic.
Thresh.
Rips Heart.
Tiggles McGuffin.
Tim Lobster. Timid the Writer.
Tony Jones. The Legend.
Total Play. Travis Edwards.
Twiddle Chungus. Ty Guy 9001. Type A Grapefruit.
Vid.
Vacant Plaza.
Valenrist.
Venom.
Vice Pup.
Video Gore.
Vic.
Joaquin, get right in my bag.
Waposa.
We are so K-back.
Weeb Trash.
Waylon.
Where am I? Help.
Widgie.
Winter Solstice.
Win TV.
Wrenchim. Zanny Tanner.
Travius.
Your boy Flyers.
Yero 12.
Yashichi. Yay Kundo.
Your mom, Winky
Zachary Lives.
Zachary Z.
Zanasso.
Zane the Impure.
Zane the Pure.
Zed Slayer Gamer.
Zero Zalazar.
Zenova.
Cyberpunk. If you'd like to help support the show, unlock new long-form projects, and help me keep improving, check out my Patreon. We got lots more videos in store. Stay tuned for more. K-Bash out.